Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn November edition. It is noon, so we will get started. We have a full agenda. My name is Maja, Senior HR Consultant with H2R and your host for today. As you can see, you have been muted, so if you have any questions, please use our chat or Q&A box, and you may ask questions at any time. Today we have Evan Campbell joining us for a quick update on Working for Workers 5 Act and Bill 190, which received royal assent just a few weeks ago. Also joining us today is Theresa McLachlan from Wilfrid Laurier University. She will be speaking to us about the perks of hiring co-op students. And I've worked with Theresa in the past in hiring co-op students, so I'm really glad she's here with us today. We have Jackie returning for part 2 of Coach's Toolkit, and I will conclude with some H2R updates. Ready to start? Evan, take it over.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. So as mentioned, I'm going to speak for a few moments about the Working for Workers 5 Act. And as you all know, this is a series of legislation that has been rolled out by the Ontario government. We recently talked about 4, now we're on to 5. Who knows, maybe there'll be a 6. But this act changed a few pieces of legislation. So we can go to the next slide. So the legislation, as mentioned, received royal assent October 28th. Some of the changes that I'm going to talk about came in effect on that date, and some additional changes will come into force at a future date once proclaimed by the government. And so the statutes which were amended, which are on the next slide, include the Employment Standards Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and that's what I'm going to focus on in our discussion today because I think it has the most impact on all of you. But as you can see, the legislation also made some changes to a handful of other pieces of legislation. So let's jump in and start talking about changes to the Employment Standards Act. And the biggest, which got a lot of news attention, was in relation to sick leave and our entitlement to ask for doctor's notes to validate the use of sick leave. So as many of you are likely aware, currently under the Employment Standards Act, employees are entitled to 3 unpaid days of sick leave. What the government did is they instituted an amendment to the Employment Standards Act, which essentially prevents the employer from requiring an employee to provide a note to validate the use of those 3 unpaid sick days. And so I think, again, this got a lot of news attention, and I think there was some valid reason advanced by the medical profession as to why, requiring medical notes for each sick day is likely a burden on them. Of course, from the employer's perspective, often we want to validate usage in those hopefully rare circumstances when we have an attendance issue with an employee. And so there was some concern advanced by employers as to the impact that this change would have on our ability to kind of push back on employees who have a pattern of excessive absenteeism. And so a couple of things that I would flag on the sick leave piece. So firstly, again, this prohibition is solely in relation to these 3 unpaid days that are provided for under the Employment Standards Act. So, if you have an employee and they use their 3 unpaid, but, they have a pattern, every Friday they're taking it off, or every Monday they're calling in sick, or every Wednesday, whatever the pattern may be, or if it's just at an excessive level, you can still ask for notes once we get past those 3 unpaid days. So don't simply take this as, okay, I can never ask for medical documentation. There's going to be circumstances where, in my view, it still makes a lot of sense. The other piece to remember, of course, is that we have obligations to accommodate under the Human Rights Code. And so while we may not be able to ask for a note from the perspective of validating entitlement under the Employment Standards Act, if we have an employee off even 1 day or 2 days, depending on the specific circumstance, we may not only want a note, but we may need a note to ensure a safe return to work. So one example that quickly comes to my mind is if someone has even a non-occupational injury, they're in a car accident or something, or they're in some other incident that results in injury, and maybe they only miss 2 days of work, but there's still the need for us to develop an accommodation plan to ensure a safe and productive return to work. So that would be a circumstance where we're not asking for the note to validate entitlement. We're asking for the note from that human rights perspective to ensure we meet our accommodation obligations. So I think there's some nuance there in terms of when we ask for note, when we don't. The other piece I would throw out there for consideration is good opportunity to go back and look at your policies around sick leave usage, good opportunity to go back and review any attendance management programs. We want to ensure those are in line with the Employment Standards Act. So again, good opportunity to work with your H2R team member or your in-house HR team to make sure those policies don't have something that says, hey, on day 2, you have to give us a note, because obviously that would potentially be offside of the Employment Standards Act. And on the attendance management piece, oftentimes there's some kind of resetting or potentially not of usage each year, right? So again, that's where a little nuance, right? If you have some tracking system where you're keeping track of attendance and you have some requirement to validate after certain use, just be mindful that you're going to have a reset, at the end of the calendar year, right? You can't simply kind of keep asking for it after a certain period. So that's the sick leave piece. The other amendment to the Employment Standards Act was the increased fines. And there's also these changes around job postings. These are not yet in force, so we'll have to keep our eye as to when they're formally implemented. But we have requirements now around specifying if the job posting is for an existing vacancy. But an interesting piece by the government, and I think my understanding of this was intended to address the scenario where people kind of had open job postings, right? Just to kind of see what kind of candidates they would get, and if they got a good one, then they would proceed, and just kind of had those kind of open. So government's trying to have some transparency around, is there actually a position open, or are we just trying to land a great candidate? There's also an amendment to the piece, the Employment Standards Act, which talks about how employers will have to provide certain prescribed information. And of course, the government hasn't told us what that prescribed information is yet, but there'll be, I'm sure, more on that. So let's move on and talk briefly about the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Yep, go ahead.
There is a question that came through. Are you able to see the Q&A, or would you like me to read it?
You know what? I think I can see it. Let me see. I can open it, just loading.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. So if a company provides more than ESA unpaid days, are they allowed to ask for a note right away, right? So great question around this. There's a couple important concepts. And one is, okay, well, what are we offering more? Are we offering paid days, right? Are we offering, and that's usually what kind of that greater right or benefit is an organization provides paid days. And I think there's a little bit of nuance there, because oftentimes what we want to do as an employer is we don't want the person to have 2 paid days and 3 unpaid. We want to offset, right? We want to say, okay, you're getting your 3 sick days, 2 of those are paid and 1's unpaid. That's usually the approach. Again, organization specific, you may say, hey, we don't care, we'll give them 2 paid and 3 unpaid. But if we're trying to offset, right? If we're trying to say, because you're permitted to under the Employment Standards Act to say, hey, we're giving you these paid days and you don't get both, then I would say we have some restriction on asking for notes, right? Because we kind of can't have it both ways. We can't say, well, we're offsetting this, or we're going to ignore the sick leave piece. So I think there's a little nuance there in terms of, can it work? And to show the classic legal answer, it depends on how you're applying that offset, would be my view. But there may be an opportunity to still ask for notes if we're kind of taking the position, we're going to give you the unpaid, but we're going to apply these paid first, for example. So in terms of the Occupational and Safety Act, some interesting changes, which I think are important for us as employers. And so the act was amended to provide for the extension of the requirements to kind of telework, right? So that's kind of essentially pushing the requirements under the Health and Safety Act to all of those employees who are working in telework scenarios. And I would say, I think a lot of employers kind of have the perspective that, okay, likely if someone's working remote, we have certain obligations to ensure they're safe in that work environment. But this definitely codifies that. And so, as many of you are likely aware, there is a provision, one of many, under OSHA, which talks about how the employer must take all essentially precautions reasonable in the circumstances to ensure a safe workplace. So this is kind of like the catch-all that applies to all of your classic, work environments. By extension, arguably now we have this obligation even in telework, private residence type scenarios. So I think there's some heightened or at least codification of our obligations to employees to ensure that wherever they're working, in their private home, etc., is safe. And so, do I think you should be going to your employees' homes and doing like inspections? Probably not, right? Like that's probably an excessive step. But who knows? There's creative ways to accomplish the goal. A checklist, having your employees go through their own checklist at their home to ensure a safe workplace, doing some virtual assessments to assess the work environment that they're working in. So I think there's ways that you can meet your due diligence obligations without, of course, doing your classic, we're going to do an inspection. Some other provisions, let's just fast forward a bit. So there's some provisions around the Joint Health and Safety Committee about where we're permitted to post the locations and names, essentially in an electronic format. I'll skip the next one just because I want to wrap up because I think I'm running out of my time. But let's go to the next slide. Let's skip this one. Oh, sorry, actually, this is the one I want to talk about, which is the definition of workplace harassment. Another important change, which is to include virtual harassment. So again, one of those pieces which if you had called me up and said, hey, we have a scenario where an employee has asserted they're being harassed virtually, I would say, hey, we should investigate. We have our obligations that are likely applicable in that scenario. But this, again, really codifies that. And so the definition of workplace harassment, if we can go to the next slide, has been expanded, right? And you'll see the underlined portion. So including a course of vexatious comment or conduct against a worker, including virtually through the use of information and communications technology. So again, just codifying that, hey, people, Teams meetings, Zooms, emails, etc. Given that so many of our employees are working remotely and never come in contact, there can still be, I think, as we all know, issues that arise which necessitate us to investigate, trigger our obligations pursuant to the Occupational and Safety Act to investigate and report. So again, just an important reminder for us. And again, sexual harassment, same thing, including the definition to expand to include virtually. So just to summarize, just so I'll wrap up my piece. So I think from the Employment Standards Act, and we can go to the next slide. Of course, we have kind of the continuing trend of additional obligations on all of you as employers, and particularly in relation to remote work. So I think go back, check all your policies and your procedures around sick leave usage. Don't simply presume you can't ask for a note. Again, I think there's nuance there. We can't ask in those first 3 days to purely validate. And I think most employers don't do that anyways. But if we have kind of the abusers of the sick leave entitlements, then I would say this is still a tool in your toolkit. And of course, the occupational and safety changes are important in terms of how we address the issue of workplace harassment in the workplace. I'm happy to answer any questions now, and I'll hang around to the end as well if there's any questions at that point.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Evan. I didn't see any questions coming through, but if there are, I'll keep an eye out. And thank you for hanging around. Very great update. So we'll go next to Theresa. And
Hi.
over to you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm here just for a quick overview of Laurier Co-op. You may or may not know much about our programs and things like that. So this is really just a quick snapshot. Yeah, so next slide, please. You may know about Laurier Co-op. We are the largest business degree co-op program in Canada. We employ or help employ more than 3,000 students annually. We work with over 1,000 employers, posting 5,500 or more jobs per year. We have lots of great students available year round. Some start in January, some start in May, and some start in September. Those are kind of the 3 terms we work with. We really do prioritize the relationship between our employers. We try and give, specified service to you, one-on-one, try and make you our priority. We have students in business, economics, arts, science, computer science, data science, many different programs I'll go through in a minute. And the proof of the success of our students is how many students get offered full-time employment afterwards. After graduation, employers are super happy to have their Laurier Co-op students join them afterwards, which is great. So our next slide there just gives a bit of a snapshot of the 15 degree programs that we have. We have students available in undergrad as well as master's programs. Students, so there's always that flow chart of they come with one program and then they break it down to their different minors and concentrations and things like that. So each student comes with a bit of a unique background from their program. Laurier Co-op is obviously going to be well known for our business and economics programs. We also have some somewhat unique double degree programs. Some are Laurier based. Some, as you can see there, are shared with our friends down the street at Waterloo. So they're taking half their degree, like a full business degree here at Laurier and a full computer science or a full math degree at Waterloo. So those are kind of unique students as well, offering a really, really diverse set of skills. Some of our other kind of neat programs are user experience design out of our Brantford campus. And yeah, those are kind of some of the more unique ones. And so on the next slide, you'll see a bit of a sample of the work study sequence that students go through. Most of our students will have kind of done 2 years of study, and you'll see in there that there's also a fundamentals course. That's a prep course that we put all of our students through after they're admitted to co-op. So in that course, they're learning about applying to jobs. They're going to get you the best resume possible, the best cover letter that they can put out. They're going to work on their interview skills, all those kind of things that we're putting the best candidates in front of all of our employers. Starting in September, we also will have faculty of arts students in a full co-op program that'll be available year round. So each program has slightly different sequencing. Some will start in the summer and kind of follow this the whole sequence as well. So that's students that are available sort of individual 4-month terms. And on the next slide, you'll see that we have 2 programs that are available for 12 to 16 months for work experience. So they've completed 3 years of their study and they're now available for 12 to 16 months, both user experience design and the professional experience program for computer science students. And so if we skip through to the next, and then the next slide, we're going to go through some of the details here. For people that may not be as familiar with co-op students, they engage in paid full-time work terms with alternating study terms. Co-op students are paid at least minimum wage, but obviously the salary is going to vary by industry, location, the experience the students are coming in with. All of those kind of factors play a part in it. And we do provide salary data to all potential employers on our website just to get an idea of the different salary by industry and stuff like that. But to make it a little bit easier, funding is also available. Majority of the employers and students are eligible for CRA tax credits when they hire a co-op student. And there's also additional funding options available. They're tailored to specific industries and specific study programs of the students. Definitely not an expert on those parts because the requirements and rules change often according to the economy and different things like that. So we're always happy to point you in the direction of the information so you can get the most up-to-date information to determine your eligibility and the student's eligibility. The next slide gives some sample examples of business and economic students roles. Under accounting, we have students doing finance, people and culture services, and as well as just some of the other interesting things in business functions students do. And then we have the next slide is with some of our computer science, data science, and user experience students roles. There's a lot of analytics going on, some great software development, engineering, all sorts of different things like that, as well as our user experience design students bring some really unique skills to do product design, communication, those sorts of things. And then with our arts and science students, they offer a whole lot of different skills as well. We have a lot of students in our communications program doing a lot of great things for PR, content writing. We have students working in education fields, health and wellness fields, as well as in the community, doing all sorts of things from laboratory assistance and environmental compliance things to bylaw. What are the benefits of hiring co-op students from Laurier? Next slide as well. We try and make things as easy as possible for employers. We know that it's an added task when maybe you don't have enough time, and that's why you're looking for a co-op student in the first place. So we try and make it as simple and easy as possible. You'd have a dedicated co-op consultant like myself, and we can take care of everything. You give us a job description, we can get it posted, we can get the applicant bundled up for you once the job posting closes, and all you have to do is review. You let us know who you want to interview, if you want to interview anyone, and we set up interviews for you, make sure students are available, can attend on time and things like that. You send them a link and the interviews happen, and then we can work with you to make job offers and things like that. I don't think I mentioned before, a number of our programs have competitive entry. So we've already sort of helped you with making sure that the students are competitive in their programs, rated against their peers and things like that. So they've already come into the program with some work experience, some volunteer and extracurricular activities, some strong GPAs, things like that. So they're well-rounded candidates coming to you right from the start. And we also run that fundamentals course to make sure that they're putting their best selves forward in their documents that you're going to see initially, as well as in their interviews with you. And then again, in parts like employers want to recruit all around, all course, every 4 months we have new candidates. We would have all levels of students. So each term we have first work term students, second, third work term students looking for their roles. Yeah, we're going to be checking in as well. You're not going to be left with a student that you're not really sure what is going on here. We want to check in, make sure that everything's going smoothly. We check in throughout the hiring process as well as the work term. We do ask employers to help us evaluate the student's performance at the end of the work term, but we'll check in a couple times. We'll have conversations to make sure that things are running smoothly throughout the term. And then on the next slide there, if you're interested to chat about the different possibilities within your organization, we're happy to chat about that. You can participate with multiple schools, which is something that a lot of employers aren't really sure about. If you want to post at your local school, but you also want to expand your talent pool, one thing about university students is they're often traveling for their university. Many of us, we go to university in one city, but we live somewhere else. We're traveling back home for the summer. So it's always nice to expand that candidate pool just a bit to see if there's students in Ottawa, Toronto, London, all those outside areas that you may not first think, well, Laurier is in Waterloo. Why would we post if we're located outside of that? But we have students from all over Ontario and a number of students that are willing to go on an adventure and try living somewhere else for the summer or for the work term. So it's always an option to post with us. And if you're not looking for co-op students, I will promote that we do have a great career center at Laurier where they share postings to alumni. Laurier's Career Center might be a little unique in that alumni have access lifetime. Some universities, you have access to their job postings for 6 months after you graduate, so it's really a new grad focus. But at Laurier, you have access for your lifetime. So if you're ever looking for someone further along in their career, there's an opportunity to post with us for that as well.
Theresa, there's just a question that came in, but I
Sure.
think you already answered, but maybe you could expand a little bit. Do your students typically remain within the Waterloo region, or can they be recruited from organizations that are outside of the city? And as a side note, I've also had wonderful experience hiring co-op students, many of which eventually join our teams full-time in graduation. So,
that's great to hear. And yes, definitely. Outside of Waterloo region, we're co-op consultants at Laurier. We kind of work in specific territories. So technically my territory is Waterloo and Eastern Ontario. So it's quite a range, which is kind of unique, but we have fantastic consultants all over Ontario and Canada as well well, I guess all of our consultants are kind of in Ontario, but we work with employers that are located across Canada, internationally, locally, all over the place.
Great. We have another question come through. Theresa, how would you recommend employers promote themselves outside of the co-op job posting itself so they are considered a preferred employer for students, rating them number one during the job matching process?
So we do have employers come on campus. There's that option that they can come and they can kind of we have speaker series where you're kind of chatting with co-op students and even non-co-op students to just kind of let them know all about maybe the jobs that you're hiring for, the culture, all of those sorts of things. So that's always an option to have employers come on campus and have little discussions with students. There's also often opportunities to get involved with different clubs on campus as well. Sometimes they'll be looking for little speaker series for their clubs, or they want to do not necessarily a case competition, but they want to partner with organizations to see if you have a problem that you're looking to solve, and maybe they can help you in some ways. We also have community workplace partnerships. They're our neighbor across the parking lot here, and they actually do some stuff with students in their classes where it can be a marketing concern or different business students in different business classes can have a task that they're looking to solve. So there's different ways to get involved in classes, business clubs, even co-op recruiting sort of speaker series. So there's a few different options available.
Amazing, thank you. And so if an employer wanted to hire for the January start date, is it too late right now in the cycle, or are there still good to go?
Still plenty of great candidates available. We really will post until the last student is hired. So anytime that someone's looking, we're happy to help.
Great, good to know.
Awesome.
All right, so I think that's it for questions for Theresa. If you think of any others, please put them in the chat box. Theresa will be here with us until the end, so she can address those. Thank you so much. All right, next up, we have our lovely Jackie. Jackie, are you ready?
I am indeed. Thank you.
Awesome, over to you.
Thank you, gang. Hey, everybody, good to see you again. For those of you who weren't here for the last session in the Lunch and Learn, I did the Coach's Toolkit version 1. And it was Maja and I were brainstorming, like, what can we do? What are some topics that are relevant? So we were being a bit playful, and I tried to do 15 frameworks or tools in 15 minutes. This is going to be the same. It's going to be rapid fire. I just didn't do 15. I just kind of downsized it a little bit because it could be a bit overwhelming. However, one of the things I believe is that, and I shared this with you all last time, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So for me, it's just about finding a framework or a model that helps a team or an individual get alignment with themselves, with their team, with the organization. So to me, it's like I want a framework or a methodology to help us have really brilliant conversations to move us forward. I'm hoping out of this, you find one or two new ones. It's like, oh, never heard of that one. Or you look at an old goodie and you go, I hadn't thought about using it that way. That's my goal. So I'm hoping you walk out with one or two nuggets. Let's go to the next slide. All right, next slide, please. So this is part 2 of those toolkits. This first one is called Conversational Dashboard. So the Conversational Dashboard was created by my mentor, Judith Glaser. She was a world-renowned neuroscientist, and she wrote the book Conversational Intelligence. It's a framework designed to enhance communication and to move to better collaboration, better outcomes. It emphasizes, bottom line, it emphasizes the importance of how do we have brilliant conversations that builds trust, fosters that trust, that nurtures the relationships, that drives effective teamwork, okay? And so if you look at the one side of the slide, on the bottom left, you see the I. That's when we're in I mode. I want this, I look for this, I see this, right? We're in a bit of, as Brene Brown would say, we're kind of armoring up and we're in protect mode. So if you look at the bottom left, when we're in I mode, we're kind of resistant and skeptical. And when you're speaking from I, the people who are listening to you will also likely be in wait and see or skepticism. When we move to the kind of conversations that are genuinely about us, we're in partner mode. We are co-creating something together, and that's the highest level of trust. So I've used this tool in a multitude of ways. So one, I can use it one-on-one with someone and say, listen, I feel like we're not connecting at the level that we could be. Where are you with me? And I'd walk them through the dashboard. It's like, Jackie, you're new to me. I don't know you yet. I'm in wait and see mode. Okay, how can I move our level of trust? How do I need to show up for you so that we can get closer to experimenter and co-creators? So I can do it one-on-one. I've done it with teams. So where do you believe you are as a team in terms of how you're showing up with trust and being open and truly partnering? And I've also used it with a full organization. So it's a tool that conversational intelligence, the CIQ that Judith Glaser created in her book, Conversational Intelligence. So kind of a fun tool. Next slide. So the old SWOT analysis, of which we've probably used a multitude of times in our lives, right? It's mostly used in the context of strategic planning. So as an organization, and we're doing business strategy development, we're going to take a look through the lens of SWOT. What are our identified internal strengths? What do we believe our weaknesses are alongside the external opportunities and the threats? The goal is to hear everybody's perspectives from a change management perspective. I love it about pulling ideas and biases and beliefs about the market and the opportunities from everybody across the organization. But you can also use it through the lens of project management. Evaluate a potential success of a project by looking at what do we believe are the internal and external factors. We can use the SWOT analysis from a team development perspective. So assess the team's dynamics, identifying areas for improvement and skill development. From a role alignment perspective, so looking to assign, use strengths to assign certain roles that maximize the team's performance. You can use it obviously in market analysis and looking at market opportunities from a pure marketing and sales perspective. But it also works for performance evaluation. So employee performance reviews, assess the individual or the team performance by looking at the strengths in the areas together as a whole unit. You can use it as organizational assessment. So evaluate the overall health of the organization in terms of what do we believe are the internal capabilities and the external challenges. And you can tell I use it from a change management perspective and taking a look at culture and navigating through change, training and development. So I hope you're getting the point. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. And it's a very simple tool that allows a group of people to become aligned and have a safer kind of challenging conversation if they need to. Next slide, please. All right, another oldie but a goodie, but I'm noticing that I'm still using it. So this is Patrick Lencioni, who had written the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So it identifies the common challenges that we face, like absence of trust when team members are unwilling to be vulnerable with each other, and it leads to a lack of openness, right, and transparency and honesty. The fear of conflict, so teams are avoiding healthy debate and those really hard discussions. And so when you have that, you end up with artificial harmony. I see that a lot. Lack of commitment. So without open dialogue and engagement, team members aren't fully committed to decisions. They're agreeing, but they're not committing to decisions. And then there's avoidance of accountability, which is the second one I see the most. Team members really hesitating to hold each other accountable for their actions and contributions. They feel uncomfortable. So I want to begin to normalize that by building some of that trust, by helping them have conflict conversations in a healthy way. And then the last one, inattention to results. So team members prioritizing their individual goals and not being aligned on the collective goals and holding each other accountable to those. So in terms of how to use it, I've done this in a bunch of ways. So, a number of H2R consultants have done it with me. So we've done it with teams, like intact leadership teams. We take them through the 5 dysfunctions over time, navigating each of the stages so they can build their skill sets, their competencies around being able to do this kind of work better. So really great from a team perspective. I've done it from a pure one-on-one, just help understand what are their beliefs about how they are doing with the team or how they are leading the team. I've done it in the context of, all right, we're going to create a culture of healthy conflict. Here's a tool that could help us to get better at that here. You can also use this tool as a measurement. Patrick Lencioni allows teams to come in and actually measure the health of their team around these things. So lots of different ways to use the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And again, if any of you on the call are and listening and you've got something in your brain and you want to brainstorm partner, call me. One of my sister and I joke that when we retire, we're going to create the Lazy Facilitator website. And that I'm sitting at home just like I am in my casual hat, my glasses, and I want to design really great conversations, whether it's in full groups or just people one-on-one. So this stuff I love. Next slide, please. All right, so conflict models. The Thomas Kilmann conflict model, again, likely something that some of you have seen. So designed in 1974 by Kenneth Thomas and what was his name, Ralph Kilmann, studied workers and their routine conflicts that happen in the workplace. And over time, they were able to observe different patterns in which people resolve conflict. Not that any one of these is right or wrong. It's about understanding that we come into conflict with a different sort of personality style for starter and different ways or behaviors in terms of how we show up. So their model shows the model with the 2 approaches known as the dimensions, the 2 dimensions. So on the vertical side, you're seeing assertiveness, and on the horizontal side, you see cooperation. most of you are probably intimately familiar with the dimensions on their own, but one of the tricks is having people learn how to be respectful to the different styles. So if I am working with someone who's avoidant, but I also have someone who's competitive, we're going to need to build trust between those people and have them agree on how to have like difficult conversations. And so I'll often create conflict norms with an individual or with a team of people saying, given our styles, how do we choose to show up with each other to make sure that we're doing this in a fruitful way that moves us to performance, that moves us to better trust, those kinds of things. So there's free versions of this online that you could choose to use with your folks, and then there's the paid version as well. So just one model for conflict. Next slide, please.
And Jackie, while we're just at the TKI,
Yeah.
that typically comes also with an assessment, does it?
It does. There's a free version and there's a paid version if you wanted to use it.
Okay.
The other thing I noticed is I can't load Q&A. It just sits there loading, but I am noticing I can read the chat. So if anyone wanted to drop anything in the chat, I can read the chat. I just can't read Q&A for some reason. All right, so some of you have, thank you. Some of you have probably done the Dare to Lead programs that have been offered in our community. It's her, some of her research has been, how do I word this? So this content has been around a long time, but one of the gifts that Brene Brown brings from my perspective is simplifying some of the academic stuff that's been created. I wanted to just share one. I was like, okay, I'll give you the Rumble language. And I used it just this morning with a client. Weirdly enough, I'm coaching 2 mayors. Like, I think it's like, why are mayors showing up on my coaching calendar? But anyway, so the one I had this morning, and she was talking specifically about going to council, and she knew there was a really big debate coming. And she said, I don't want to get defensive. I don't want to be in fight mode, in defense mode. So we're talking about how do you show up? And so one of the things I gave her was, let's practice Rumble language from Brene Brown. So Brene Brown talks about what's the story or narrative that you have. And she often says, what's your shitty first draft? So the story I'm making up, Maja, is that I think I might be pissing you off that I'm always on camera. Like, we just bring it up and say, here's the story or narrative I have. Maja, let me check in and see if I'm wrong. So that's an approach that the Rumble language would look like. I'm curious about, it's like, I'm curious about, I don't know, why you are unresponsive to my emails. I'm making stuff up right now, but you do it with this language so that it's not so aggressive and in your face. Tell me more about that. And that's not my experience. I get that it's yours, but it's not mine. I'm wondering, right? Help me understand this a little bit more. Walk me through that, because I'm not on the same page as you. So walk me through it. I see a lot of passion in you. What's this passion around for you? And tell me why this doesn't fit or work for you when it does for me. Tell me more about that. So just a great cheat sheet for Rumble language when you know that someone's kind of triggering you and you need to be able to manage your own emotions and make better choices. All right, next slide, please. The narrative rewind tool, this comes from the work with David Drake, because he's known as the narrative coach. And so one of my certifications is in narrative coaching. And David is a prominent figure in the coaching world because of the practices around narration and storytelling. And I've taken not just teams, but even a couple of organizations through what's the new narrative we want to write about our company. And you can do it with an individual or 2 people in conflict. The tool is designed to help individuals and groups really reflect on their experiences, the stories that they create, and help them reframe or rewrite those stories, and to create new narratives that lead to some sort of transformation, whether it's for the individual or for the organization. I love this tool. I don't think I realize just how often I lean on this, because we all get stuck in our stories, right? So I can use it from a personal development perspective. We can use it in coaching sessions. You can use it with a whole team. From a great change management perspective, I just took 2 teams through it and said, okay, let's talk about your experiences during this change. And what's the story you have on it now? What's the story you want to create by next year? And what do we need to do to make sure we get there? So lots of different ways to lean on this tool, maybe even cultural initiatives. So using it to gather stories, reflect on the organization's values and how they're showing up. onboarding, so incorporate narrative rewinds into onboarding programs and helping new employees share their backgrounds and experiences to enhance their connection and trust with their new teams. So a couple of different ways to use the narrative rewind tool. All right, next slide. So PERMA model. Again, I'm sure some of you are familiar with PERMA, something that comes up a lot for me because of the positive psychology background. This was designed by Dr. Marty Seligman. He's known as the father of positive psychology, prominent psychologist. He's the founder of positive psychology in general. He created the term PERMA so that we understand the flourishing life that is consistent for all people across all cultures in all languages. These are the 5 core elements that contribute to human flourishing and well-being. Martin Seligman wrote the book Flourish, so you could gather some more information there. If you Google PERMA model, you're going to find a lot of free stuff for you. So we want to make sure that all humans have a sense of positive emotion, experiencing joy and gratitude. It's not about dismissing their negative. It's about what do we do with the things that are frustrating us and making us angry. Now, what are we going to do? Great leaders, I'll often take them through PERMA because I'm like, your job is to monitor the PERMA. And here's some ways in terms of how we could do that. Engagement, being deeply absorbed in the work and using our natural strengths, hopefully getting into a place of flow because we're so happy doing what we're doing that we lose track of time. Relationships that are positive, so building and maintaining those positive, strong connections of trust. All human beings want to feel positive. We want to be engaged. We want great relationships where we have each other's backs. All human beings also want to have meaning. Meaningfulness matters to us. So having a sense of purpose, that sense of belonging and contributing to something greater than ourselves. And then lastly, accomplishment. Achieving goals and having a sense of mastery and success matters to all human beings. So I will use this tool one-on-one to say, what 1 or 2 might you be falling short on? What are you feeling? Where do you need a lift in your life? Or I've used it with the team to say, walk me through how this team is supporting this model or not. Where could there be some cultural challenges here inside the organization? So from my perspective, it shows up in whether it's helping that person in terms of their own engagement and well-being at work. Maybe it's about learning to cultivate relationships of trust. Maybe the tool is about finding meaning. I actually find I use that one a lot. Is when people are lacking that sense of belonging and meaningfulness, is leaning on the tool here and creating some exercises to help them to do that. All right, PERMA model, next slide. Last one, gang. This is called flow state. And again, coming from research related to positive psychology. So the flow state model, it builds on the concept of flow, originally introduced by Maja. I can't pronounce his last name, so forgive me. So if you look at the model and you see where flow is on the top right-hand side, right? Flow refers to that mental state when we have complete immersion and engagement in our activity. It's characterized by our ability to like really focus, but we're also feeling that enjoyment, that fulfillment, and a sense of mastery. It's like, I think I'm good at this, right? At the same time, we're being challenged. I hope that makes sense to you. So those are the key elements. You want to be in that state of flow because there's high challenge and it's tough, but at the same time, you're really good at it. So you're still challenged, but you're still allowing all your strengths to show up. Sometimes I'll use this one-on-one because I want the clients to understand what their flow state is. Now it could be, and pop it in the chat if anyone's willing. Honestly, I've had clients say to me, golfing, Jackie, when I go golfing, he's my favorite client right now. He's a runner. Every second Friday I coach him. And man, even if I can get him, if he's like kind of triggered at something at work, I'll go, okay, we're on the road. We're in a 10K race. It's a small one for you. I take him into the mindset for a minute to help him solve his problems because he gets very sort of creative and open when he's in that flow state. For some people, it could be you're sitting down coding, like you just love computer science, you love digging into problem solving and fixing bugs in code. You could be the accountant that's looking at the spreadsheets and you're getting lost in the numbers. Or you could be someone like me. When I'm on a stage and there's 1,000 people in the room and I'm feeling the energy of the room, I don't even think, I'm just existing. And that's called flow state. So we can use this to help people set goals, career goals. We can help them, we could give feedback saying, here's how you might be showing up. I'm noticing high anxiety. What do you think that could be this? Help them figure out where they are and what might be going on. Balance their challenges with their skill set and figure out what they need. Giving people a sense of control, but also most of all for me, it's that intrinsic motivation and encouraging activities that are enjoyable and fulfilling. Maybe they're in a role where they don't get it right now. So if they're in that job for a year, it's like, what else can you do to keep that balance while you figure out what's next in your life? So lots of uses in the workplace, whether it's team or whether it's individual. All right, next slide. That's it from me. I hope I did it justice. I didn't go too crazy fast. And if anyone has any questions, just ask or send an email. I'm open.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think those are amazing frameworks and models that we can incorporate. But again, if any of our participants are interested in learning more, they can either reach out to us or Jackie. She has her email right there. Awesome. Okay, so quickly, I have a few H2R updates. We are offering a year-end HR health and compliance check for just $600. This will give you a comprehensive report outlining your company's current compliance status, along with an actionable roadmap. It is a great way to end the year to ensure you are addressing any high-risk areas. So if you are interested, please reach out to admin@yourh2r.com and we would be happy to connect. And to conclude with some good news, this year, instead of holiday gifts for our clients, H2R made financial donations to the food bank here in KW and Cambridge. So on behalf of our clients, H2R has made a difference in our community once again. So thank you, Jill, and the leadership team. And I believe that concludes November's Lunch and Learn. Our next Lunch and Learn for December is scheduled for December 17th. So look out for an invitation to that. We also advertise on our social media so that you can register yourself. Again, let me just check if there's any questions. I don't see any questions coming through, but thank you everyone for participating, and thank you again to our speakers, and we'll see you next month. Bye for now.